You're listening to Big World Network.
Subprimeval, Season 2, Episode 4, Kentucky Bluegrass, Part 2. Written by Robert S. C. Cutler. Read by Ryan Jones. Warning: although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. Roy Decker drove his four-wheeler and trailer into the barn with the strange creature wrapped in barbed wire and chains. Nate closed the large doors and padlocked them from the inside. Zach lit a kerosene lantern and hung it next to some old horse tack, adding to the light of a single bulb hanging from the center rafter. "Get off that thing and help me with this wrought iron," Nate griped at Roy while he dragged a 6-foot section of old fencing over to the trailer. "I don't know why you're set on building a cage for that thing. It ain't going nowhere the way we've got it tied up. I gotta make a haul to Louisville this afternoon, and I'd feel a whole lot better if I knew it was secure and behind bars." "Don't worry, little brother. I'll keep an eye on it for you," Roy said as he climbed off the four-wheeler. "Me and the kids will make sure it doesn't go anywhere." Nate shook his head. "No kids, Roy. I don't want them anywhere near that thing. Did you see what it did to Cole's leg?" Roy shook his head and half chuckled. "Tore him up pretty good. That boy needs to see a doctor." "No doctor either," Nate yelled. "First, I don't want to try and explain how he got hurt, and second, I just plain can't afford it." "Don't know what you're so concerned about. You're bound to get rich off this thing." "I don't have the money in my pocket yet. I barely have enough to buy food for the week." "That's your own fault for taking a second out on your house. How was I supposed to pay for my rig? Ask you or Daddy for the money?" Nate said. "I know you and that old man have cash stashed away in that house of yours somewhere." Roy removed his hat, wiped his brow, and then spat tobacco juice onto the floor of the barn. "Shit, Nate. You don't even know what you're talking about. The old man ain't got a dime to his worthless name, and all of my money is in the bank where it's gonna stay. But I'll tell you what, I'll pay for the doctor, and you can pay me back when those tabloid people come to take their pictures." Nate placed an unlit cigarette in his mouth, moving it around with his lips while he thought about the offer Roy had just made. He wandered over to the creature, keeping a safe distance, studying the way its eyes reflected back the light of the kerosene lantern. He knelt down, tracing the outline of the creature's body with his finger, watching with great fascination its ribcage bellowing in and out with each taxing breath. "Do you want my help or not?" asked Roy. "Sure," Nate answered, without taking his eyes off the creature. "But Jimmy takes Cole into town, not you. You have to stay here and stand watch over this freak of nature." "Fine with me. I hate doctors' offices anyway," Roy laughed. "And don't do nothing, or tell nobody about this till I get back. We'll figure out a plan of action then." "No worries, little brother. Your secret is safe with me." The sun cascading through the filth-covered windows of the barn reminded Nate that he'd had barely any sleep the night before, and if he was going to make it to Louisville and back before midnight, he better get to bed. The old farmhouse his great-grandfather had built looked weathered and beaten down against the barren landscape of winter. All but 3 of the upstairs windows were boarded up, and the green-shingled roof was blacker than green these days. Nate had made a stack of promises to his wife before she had passed away that he would fix all of the problems that ailed the aging structure. But after her death, all he'd felt like doing was drinking and sleeping. Jimmy was in the kitchen cooking eggs and toast for Cole and Zach. A fresh pot of coffee was brewing, filling the house with the aroma of morning. Nate paused at the foot of the stairs and looked upon his children with a heavy heart. "You want some breakfast, Daddy?" asked Jimmy. "I'm making coffee. It should be ready real soon." "I'm going to bed. Gotta make a run this afternoon, so I need y'all to be quiet and stay out of that barn. Uncle Roy's in there watching over that creature Jimmy caught. Oh, and your sister's taking you to see the doctor, Cole." Jimmy's eyes lit up. "I get to drive to town?" "The pickup has half a tank in her. That should be plenty to get you to that urgent care and back. Your Uncle Roy has the cash for the doctor." "What should I say happened to Cole's leg?" asked Jimmy. "I don't know," Nate snapped. "Tell him he got hurt on some farming equipment or something like that. Just don't say the truth." He trudged up the narrow, wooden stairs, mumbling under his breath. Gemma waited until he closed the bedroom door before she returned to her cooking. Smiling big, she couldn't stop thinking about driving into town. She had taken her father to the grocery or liquor store several times before, when he had been too inebriated to drive himself, but she had never driven on her own. "Can I come?" asked Zach, interrupting Gemma's daydream. "No," Gemma said. "Cole's gonna have to lay across the seat, so there won't be enough room for you." After she cleared the table and cleaned up the dishes, Gemma threw on her coat and ran down to the barn to get the money for the doctor from her Uncle Roy. When she walked through the side entrance, she heard Roy talking to someone on his cell phone, but couldn't see where he was. In the middle of the large room, the creature stirred, making Gemma jump. It was still bound by chains and barbed wire to the trailer, but the metal fence post Nate had wedged into the creature's mouth like a bit was partially out and gnawed halfway through, allowing it to move its lower jaw. As Gemma made her way around the four-wheeler and trailer, the creature stopped chewing and locked its gaze upon her. Gemma felt it stare and paused mid-stride, afraid to look in the creature's general direction. She had the sudden urge to pee, and just wanted to get the money from her Uncle Roy so she could get back to the safety of the house. Roy's voice echoed somewhere above Gemma in the loft. She looked up and spotted him, standing by a window. She heard him say, "money," and "he won't know a thing," several times before hanging up. When Roy looked down and saw his niece looking up at him, an angry scowl washed over his face. "What in the hell are you doing in here? Your daddy gave me strict instructions to keep all of you kids out of the barn." The look on her Uncle Roy's face and angry tone of his voice startled Gemma. She had only known him as a fun-loving, warm, and caring man, total opposite from her father. "I'm sorry, Uncle Roy, I just—" "Were you eavesdropping on my private conversation, girl? Is that what you were doing?" "No, sir. I just came to get the money for the doctor, so I could take Cole," she stammered. Roy continued to scowl, never once taking his eyes off of Gemma. He dropped $100 worth of 20s from the loft, waiting for them to float down to the floor before he disappeared into the shadows. "Make sure you bring me the change, all of the change," he said in a low, threatening voice. "Yes, sir, I will," Gemma replied, while she scooped up the money. "Thank you, Uncle Roy." Roy didn't respond back. He watched from the loft as Gemma exited the barn and then took out his phone and pressed redial. Gemma ran into the house crying. She sat down in a tattered wingback chair opposite of the couch Cole was lying on, clutching the wad of cash Roy had given her. Cole opened up his eyes and asked what was wrong. "He was so mean to me," Gemma sniffled. Tears were running down her cheeks. "He's never spoke to me like that before. Ever." "What do you mean? Daddy always yells at us." "Not Daddy, Uncle Roy. He got real angry because I was in the barn and then accused me of listening to his phone conversation." Cole lifted his head off of the couch. "Maybe he was talking to his girlfriend and got embarrassed." Gemma raised her eyebrows at Cole. "Why would Uncle Roy get embarrassed about talking to a girl?" "You all made fun of me when Savannah Tomes called." "That's different. You're 13 and Uncle Roy is like 40 or something. Besides, I think he was talking business." Gemma sat up and thought for a moment. "I think he's planning something on Daddy. Maybe he's going to steal the money." Cole scoffed. "But they're brothers. Brothers don't steal from each other." "You stole from me, Cole," Zach yelled from the kitchen. "You took all of the candy bars out of my Halloween bag last year." "Keep your voice down. Daddy's trying to sleep," Gemma yelled back. "And Daddy doesn't have money anyway," Cole said. Gemma gasped. "He will if he sells that monster I caught in the bear trap." She got up from the chair, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket, and then wiped her nose with the same sleeve. "I have an important job for you, Zach. When I take Cole to the doctor, you're going to spy on Uncle Roy to see—" Zach shook his head. "I ain't spying on Uncle Roy. He's always been nice to me." "But he's not being nice to Daddy. And if Daddy finds out you didn't help him, well, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes," Gemma warned. Zach thought quickly about it. "Fine, but it'll cost you a pop." "What kind?" "Root beer. And Twizzlers, too." Gemma shook Zach's hand. "Deal. You can spy from the house if you want. Just let me know if anybody drives up to the barn while we're gone." Tired from being awake since midnight, Zach sat in Father's recliner, fighting to keep his eyes open while watching an old console television his grandparents had bought in the mid-70s. The picture quality was poor, and they had limited stations from the satellite dish his father and Uncle Roy had rigged up. Just as Zach dozed off, he heard the front door creak open. He opened his eyes just enough to see his uncle walk to the foot of the stairs. Roy listened for a moment and then went into the kitchen and rummaged through the refrigerator. No wonder those kids are so skinny. The cheap bastard doesn't have any decent food to eat in his house, Roy said under his breath. While Roy was busy in the kitchen, Zach hid behind the couch to see what he was taking. Minutes later, Roy walked into the living room with a container of chicken Gemma had fried up the night before, 2 beers, and Nate's good whiskey. He stopped one more time at the foot of the stairs and listened. Content that his brother was asleep, Roy headed out the front door, closing it gently behind him. Not 5 minutes later, Zach heard a vehicle driving down the gravel road and toward the barn. He ran to the front of the window just in time to see a white dually pulling a horse trailer, circling around, and then back in close to the large barn doors. 2 burly men, one carrying a shotgun, slid out of the truck and walked around to the side of the entrance where Roy was waiting for them. Roy stood for a long time looking in the direction of the house, making sure Nate hadn't woken up. "Okay, Junior, show us what you got," the man with the shotgun said. "The name's Roy, Travis, not Junior," Roy said. "I haven't gone by Junior since grade school and you know it." The second man, Lee Stoltz, laughed. "Why is it you 2 morons have to carry on with the names every time you see each other?" "Well, where is it?" asked Travis. "It's just inside," Roy said. "But you 2 ladies might want to hold on to your willies, because it's not like anything you've ever seen before." Roy led the 2 men inside and around the trailer. As their eyesight adjusted, the creature stirred and let out a low growl, causing Travis and Lee to jump and backpedal. The metal fence post was snapped in 2, hanging by the chains wrapped around the creature's body, allowing it full range of its mouth and limited movement with its upper body. Travis gasped. "Holy shit! What is that thing? Some kind of alien?" Lee swallowed hard, trying to comprehend with his limited brain just what he was looking at. "I don't know about this, Roy." "Told you, boys," Roy laughed. "I'm going to make a mint of this thing." "You said it was restrained and half dead," Lee said in a low whisper. Both men were visibly shaken. Roy removed his hat and scratched his bald head. He studied the creature's bindings and reassured himself that it was still secure. "Must have done this while I was checking on Nate." "How are you planning on loading it into the horse trailer?" asked Travis. "Because I'm not getting anywhere near those teeth." "You will if you want to get paid," Roy said. Lee shook his head and took a few steps back from the creature. "I'm with Travis, Roy. I don't want to get bit either." "Hell, I'll just drive it up the ramp with the 4-wheeler, Roy said. "Trailer won't fit your ATV in that thing at the same time, whatever it is," Troy said. "Ain't big enough." Becoming exasperated, Roy clenched and unclenched his hands. "Then I'll just push it up in there myself. But your fees just went down." "Now just a goddamn minute, Junior," Travis yelled. "We agreed to a price. A price that included you helping. We are helping. We're transporting it for you, ain't we?" "Now, Travis has a point, Roy," Lee said in a calm voice. "We'll take it to the university for you, but that's all we're going to do." Roy looked down at the ground and shook his head. "Fine, but you're still taking my picture for that tabloid magazine." Both men agreed and stepped around to get a better look at the creature. As Roy was posing for the camera, he caught a glimpse of the side door opening and someone short sneaking inside. He put a finger to his lips and then motioned with his head. Travis went one way and Lee went the other. When Zach saw the big men coming for him, he took off and ran straight into his Uncle Roy. "Well, looky here, boys, we caught us a spy," Roy declared. "I'm sorry, Uncle Roy. I was just checking on you to see if you were okay," Zach said. His body was trembling. Roy got a worried look on his face. "Your daddy didn't send you out here, did he?" "No, sir. He's still asleep upstairs." "Don't lie to me, son." Zach started to cry. "I swear, Uncle Roy." "What should we do with him, boys?" asked Roy. "Feed him to the monster," Travis laughed. "Now come on, Roy," Lee said. "He's just a kid." Roy picked up Zach and slung him over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. As he started toward the creature, it sniffed the air with its moist snout. Its eyes became big, black orbs, and saliva pooled up in its mouth, dripping off of its teeth in anticipation of its first meal in over 24 hours. Straining to move its body, one of the strands of barbed wire snapped, freeing the creature's right arm. "Feed him to the thing already," Travis laughed. Roy lifted his nephew high above his head. Zach locked eyes with the creature, which was snapping its jaws at the air like a crocodile. He screamed out in mortal terror and blacked out.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.